After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. So it says after this. So this was, they had been in Cana, which was where the wedding feast was going on, where he turned water into wine. So it says after this, they went down to Capernaum. Now, Capernaum was actually north of Cana, but it was downhill. So they didn't think of it as north and south. They just thought of, well, I've got to walk. I'm walking downhill, so we're going down to Capernaum. Now, I'm assuming they were going to Capernaum. It was about 20 miles from Cana. I'm assuming they were going to Capernaum because that's where some of the disciples' families lived. Now, we know later that Jesus' sort of home base for his ministry was Capernaum. So it's possible that they were already sort of making that move. We know they were originally from Nazareth, which was about 30 miles from Capernaum. Not exactly sure where home base was at this point, but it seems like Capernaum is an obvious place because some of the disciples, lived there. So that kind of would make sense. It says there they stayed for a few days. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now it says almost time. It's because it would take a long time to get to Jerusalem. And notice it says he went up to Jerusalem. It's because that was an uphill trek, and since they were on foot, they knew it was up to Jerusalem. And so you may say, well, why did they go to Jerusalem? Well, basically, what would happen is pretty much every year at the Passover, the Jerusalem would swell to just hundreds of thousands of people that were coming from all over the world to come and do Passover. We say, what is Passover? Well, the Jewish system in general basically worked like tithing, but it's tithing a little different than we have tithing today. Basically, what would happen is everybody was to give a tenth of their increase. Now, that's not a tenth of all your wealth. It's just a tenth of your increase for that year. And so every 2 out of 3 years, you would give it to the Levites. The Levites were in, basically many different areas, and so you'd give it to the Levites, and they would do a couple of things. They would supply their own needs with it, but also they would give it to the poor and give it to the needy, and they'd give it to aliens and strangers and people from other areas. And so that was what you were to do 2 out of 3 years. Every third year, you were to take your tithe, your tenth, and to go to Jerusalem where the temple was and to sacrifice it, basically. And generally, sacrifice was not... it wasn't you just give it to the temple. A lot of times, like the Passover, what you do is you sacrifice it and then you enjoy, that meal with your group of travelers, with your family. So anyways, all that to say that people were traveling to Jerusalem constantly. And what the Old Testament says is okay to do is if you have a large increase, if you would potentially be traveling with a huge mound of livestock, well, you can do that, but you don't have to if you don't want. What you can do is sell those livestock where you are, get a fair price for it, carry that coinage to Jerusalem where the temple is, and sell, and then buy basically the equivalent once you're there. And then you sacrifice that. You go through the ritual that way. So both of those sorts of things were happening. People were taking livestock there, but then also people were selling it and showing up with money in hand. So both of those were okay, and were in the Old Testament. But here's what we find there. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So here's basically what had developed from that system by the time Jesus showed up on the scene. The Jewish leadership had decided that they wanted to make a profit off of this whole system. And so basically what they did is they said, we don't accept any coins from anywhere else in the world. You had to have a certain kind of coin to buy animals in the temple. And so basically what they would do is the money changers would take your money from wherever in the world, say you came from Greece or from Rome or or just from the Galilee. You would have a different kind of coin. And so you would have to come in and you'd have to change your coin for temple coinage. And when you do that, the temple coin changers would take a profit. And so they were making a profit off of people's obedience to God. So people were just trying to do what God told them to do, but the religious system had kind of bottlenecked it where where nobody else could just show up and use what they had. They had to use the proprietary system of the temple, and the temple then was making a profit off of that. So obviously Jesus didn't like that, what we're going to find out. And so the ones who were selling cattle and sheep and goats and all that, what they were doing is they were selling it inside the temple courts. And so you couldn't use coinage from outside, from a different place inside the temple. So to buy those animals inside the temple, you had to use the temple coins. And so, like I said, the whole thing was bottlenecked to where they were just like squeezing and choking the system to where they could get a profit out of it. Really ugly thing. I mean, when we just read this, don't quite get that sense, but it is an ugly thing. It was a despicable thing. And here's what I think we're gonna go with it, is that we find that Jesus does not like this ugly thing.